On a 9,800-acre South Texas ranch, biologists estimated 4,000 feral hogs were destroying the land faster than any control method could keep up. So the owner did something drastic. He hired a helicopter crew to shoot them from the air. What the cameras filmed 6 weeks after the final flight forced Texas A&M researchers to re-examine every recovery model they had for damaged rangeland, because what the footage showed was not supposed to happen for years. Cole Bennett's family has worked the same brush country ranch for 4 generations. For most of that history, the land supported cattle, quail, whitetail, the kind of working landscape that defines South Texas. Then, over 3 seasons, the hogs came in force. Not the drifting sounders that had always passed through. Something else. Camera trap grids and damage mapping surveys put the population on the property at roughly 4,000 animals. You could see it from a truck. 40-acre pastures that used to carry 40 cows had been reduced to red dirt moonscapes in a matter of nights. Fences lay in tangled heaps where hogs had shouldered through them. Watering holes had turned into fouled wallows that sickened his cattle. Ground-nesting birds, bobwhite quail, mourning dove, had almost stopped nesting on the property. Cole was replanting hayfields faster than they could recover, watching calf weights drop and spending more on fence repair in 1 year than in the previous 10 combined. And Texas as a whole is losing this fight. Biologists at Texas A&M's Natural Resources Institute estimate the state feral hog population at more than 3 million animals, causing agricultural damages that studies published in the Journal of Wildlife Management have placed in the hundreds of millions of dollars annually. One sow can produce 2 litters a year, with piglets breeding by 6 to 8 months old. In practical terms, unless something removes them at scale, a local population can grow 20% in a single year. Ground trapping helped Cole take a few hundred. Night hunts with thermal scopes helped some more. But the hogs learned fast. They shifted to thicker cover, moved onto neighboring properties whenever pressure came, then walked right back in. He was losing ground, so he called a permitted aerial depredation team. These crews are not what most people picture. They're licensed operators flying permitted aircraft with trained marksmen and stabilized camera rigs. The method is called aerial gunning, and Texas A&M research has shown that in the open to semi-open brush country of South Texas, a single flight can remove roughly 30% of the local hog population. Follow-up flights push cumulative removal to 50 or 60% because the surviving sounders break apart and become easier to locate. It is fast. It runs several $1,000s per flight hour. And it is the only method the peer-reviewed studies have shown can move the numbers quickly enough to matter before the next breeding cycle overwhelms the ground. The first flights on Cole's ranch delivered. Hundreds of hogs were removed in coordinated passes across the worst damaged pastures, working at first and last light when animals moved in the open. But by the 3rd week, results began to slide. Survivors were hugging the mesquite lines and creek bottoms where visual acquisition dropped to almost nothing. One flight was aborted mid-pass when a wind gust kicked up a wall of red dust. Another sounder ran into a dense oak motte, and the crew held fire. The shot was not clean, and no ethical aerial crew takes a shot they cannot see through. Cole was still walking his pastures and finding fresh rooting within 100 yards of the house. The bill kept climbing. He started to wonder if he was simply slowing something unstoppable. Then the crew scheduled one last flight. This one was not for shooting, it was for documentation. A first light pass over the property to capture stabilized footage of current conditions and create a clean baseline for measuring long-term recovery. The biologists on the project were already telling Cole that visible recovery, if it came at all, would probably take 1 to 2 full growing seasons. That was the model. That was what the science predicted. The helicopter lifted off at 5:47 a.m. on a still morning, 6 weeks after the final aerial cull. 20 minutes into the flight, the cameraman asked the pilot to circle back. The footage that came off that rig that morning was reviewed later the same day in the hangar. The crew watched it 3 times, because in the zones that had been the hardest hit, pastures that 6 weeks earlier looked like red dirt battlefields, the ground was already changing. Native grasses and forbs were pushing up through the old rooting scars. The deep wallows had stabilized, and in the golden light, the stabilized camera captured what the models said should not have been there yet, a doe and her fawn grazing in one of the worst former hog-torn sections, a covey of bobwhite quail flushing from cover that had been too disturbed to hold birds a month before, whitetail moving calmly through zones that had been active wallows just days earlier. That is what stopped the room. The numbers came in over the next 6 weeks and confirmed what the dawn footage had shown. Ground surveys conducted by the ranch's contracted range biologists recorded a 70 to 80% drop in new rooting activity in the treated core. Fence repair costs fell sharply. Cattle began using pastures they had avoided for months. Wildlife cameras started recording higher deer, turkey, and small mammal numbers in the same zones. Cole later calculated that the reduction in ongoing damage and control costs would repay the entire aerial campaign within 2 grazing seasons. But the model was the part that mattered scientifically. The published research on hog-damaged rangeland recovery in South Texas has consistently projected multi-season timelines for the kind of vegetation return Cole was seeing in 6 weeks. The working hypothesis the biologists landed on was this: when hog pressure is removed intensely enough, fast enough, and across a large enough contiguous area, native vegetation communities in South Texas, brush country, can respond dramatically faster than incremental removal models predict. The rooting stops, the seed bank in the soil is still viable, and the recovery does not have to wait. That single data set, one ranch, one aerial campaign, one documentation flight, has since been cited in follow-up work by researchers at Texas A&M's Natural Resources Institute, looking at whether current recovery models systematically underestimate what damaged brush country can do when given a true reprieve. And the effect did not stay on Cole's property. He shared the dawn footage at a county extension meeting. Within a month, a loose cooperative of neighboring landowners covering more than 30,000 contiguous acres had begun coordinating their own control efforts. That larger block matters because the single biggest reason aerial gunning fails long-term on isolated ranches is reinvasion from adjoining properties. When neighbors coordinate, that failure mode gets shut off. None of this is a solved problem. Feral hogs are too prolific, too mobile, and too deeply established across the southern United States for any single ranch or any single method to erase them. Real, lasting control still requires the full toolbox. Aerial work where terrain and density make it effective, followed by trapping, exclusion fencing, habitat repair, and continuous monitoring. Fertility control research is ongoing, but remains years from field deployment. What the Bennett Ranch footage documented is narrower than a solution. It is evidence, captured on a stabilized camera at first light on a South Texas morning, that when the pressure is intense enough and the reprieve is large enough, the land can respond faster than the models say it should, faster than the biologists projected, faster in some cases than anyone in the hangar that morning believed possible until they watched the tape 3 times in a row. Whether aerial intervention belongs in modern land management is a debate that will not end soon, and there are honest arguments on both sides. But the footage that came off that ranch is now part of the record, and it is changing how at least some researchers are thinking about what damaged brush country in Texas is actually capable of. If stories about the real battles playing out on working lands matter to you, subscribe. There is another one coming.